feel like we need a fun story to start us off.
Wait, we should talk about going to the run club.
Maya and her boyfriend had an idea that we should all go to run club, and then they didn't come to run club.
Both of them were like, sorry, can't make it in the
Audie
morning.
had a valid excuse, to be fair.
He was sleeping when I left him.
Oh, I thought he was working.
No, like he had a meeting. It was just like 30 minutes later, so he was like still sleeping.
Yeah, but
what
he
can
did
you
have
do?
work. No, because then I went over later and he was working. So, but then
Okay,
he
well,
iced
suddenly,
me.
he iced you.
Wait, have you heard about this?
Because BK iced us, and we just like didn't drink the ice.
Okay, so basically, Audie came out of his room. He was clearly in a work call. He came out of the room and was like, oh, hey, Priya, can you just grab my food from the microwave? And I was like, that's like an odd request, but sure. Like, you seem like you're busy. Like, I can go grab it for you. I like go and open the microwave door, and there's 2 ices there. And I was like, no way. I just fell for that. And he was already back in his room by then.
And then we went and watched a movie. We watched Thunderbolt. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I liked it.
Speaking of this whole thing, I fell asleep in the middle of the day because I was tired and I had slept late the night before. And then Audie, BK, and Priya just like walk into the door and are laughing at me while I'm trying to sleep. And then I'm like, you know what? Like, that's fair. I'm sleeping in the middle of the day and like that's a weird thing to do. So it's okay that people are laughing at me. And then we all go to the movie and they all sleep through the movie. And I was like,
Oh, really?
yeah, like BK slept, Varun slept. And I was like, well, that's why
It's because they were
I
at
napped.
the Darty all day.
Yeah,
But I was like, that's why I napped, because I didn't want to sleep through the movie if we're going to go. And then they were like, yeah, that's like a totally different scenario and that's not related. And I was like, everything is related, guys.
Okay, well, they weren't actually laughing at you because you were sleeping. They were laughing at you because we were like, oh, let's ice Anika, because they just iced me.
That makes so much sense, because Audie comes up to me and he's like, have you showered? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, did you see anything? And I was like, first of all, after your friend like last week broke my shower mat, because my shower mat is like one of those like fake granite ones, then I was like, what have you done now? And I couldn't figure it out. And I just in this very second have put it together that there's an ice somewhere in my bathroom.
And you still haven't seen it?
No. But
I know where it is.
I fully showered though. Am I blind?
Wait,
well, I'm not going to tell you where it is.
Okay,
Like, you have to find
obvious?
it.
Is it
no,
obvious?
it's not obvious, but you'll see it.
Wait, I'm going to like try to not see it and like wait till someone else is in my bathroom and gets iced. That'd be so fun.
But like a boy?
That actually would be funny.
No, not a boy.
Who else is in your bathroom?
Okay, anyways, back to our topics of today.
Welcome back to Get the Check. I'm Maya.
I'm Anika.
I'm Priya.
And we have a fun news story lineup. So today we're talking about the upcoming HIMSS earnings and all of the news around HIMSS. If you didn't know, they are a telehealth provider, and they recently partnered with Novo Nordisk. Oh,
this is going to be a really tough episode for my pronunciations.
No, literally, okay, we're going to try this again. They recently partnered with Novo Nordisk, which is a GLP-1 manufacturer.
Yeah, they're the manufacturer of Wegovy.
Which
and
is
they also do like
semaglutide.
Ozempic and stuff.
Yeah. Cool. And then we're also going to be talking about the recent update to GPT-4o. OpenAI pushed an update that made the model more sycophantic.
Basically, it's less sick. It basically was like glazing people too much, and now it's not.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about that update and what that update means for kind of the rest of AI and AI safety.
And we're also going to touch on some papers that have come out recently in the AI space, like AI 2027, which led to Maya literally having a major crash out.
Wait, it was so funny because like Anika had a crash out like 2 days before, and then Maya had her crash out after.
Because basically we'll get into it, but the paper says that like AI is going to kill us by 2030. It's not like
there's like many branches, but that's one of the possibilities.
It's like the main one that they originally wrote. And then they were like, oh yeah, we added another one. To
make it like more positive.
But it's still not at all positive.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, even in the, okay, we'll get into this later.
Into it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're doing HIMSS first because it's a more positive topic. In a way.
More positive topic. 2/3 of this country is obese and needs weight loss medications.
Cool. So HIMSS is the
Hims and hers.
Hims and Hers. I guess is it like formally known as Hims and Hers?
Like the company name is Hims and Hers, but the ticker is Hims.
Okay. Hims and Hers is a telehealth company. They sell drugs for weight loss, sexual health. I don't even have a list. I don't even know what I'm saying right now.
Yeah, no, they
Yeah.
specifically focus on things that I think originally their whole marketing ploy was that things that you might be embarrassed to go to a doctor about, like things regarding like sexual health
Yeah.
or weight loss or things like that, are things they can provide via telehealth. And so that was their whole original marketing pitch.
Yeah. And so now they've partnered with Novo Nordisk, which pumped the stock.
Nordisk.
Novo Nordisk. I can't do this today. The reason why they're in the headlines recently is because they partnered with Novo to offer authentic Wegovy at $4.99 a month. Originally, I think it compares to $1,000 plus a month for the branded Wegovy. And this is actually still branded Wegovy, so it's the cheapest that Novo's ever offered it. And the reason why this is really important is because Hims and Hers has been selling weight loss drugs, and they have been selling semaglutides, and in February 2025, the FDA declared Ozempic and Wegovy no longer to be in a shortage, which basically means that other manufacturers and pharmacies can't sell a compounded version of it, of a named brand drug anymore, because these pharma companies have obviously patents on these drugs. And so when the drug is not in a shortage anymore, then you can't essentially copy the compound or do a compounded version of it. And so that tanked the stock price from, I think, of a high of like 70 to 80 down to 25 over the next 2 months.
Yeah, and all the execs like sold right before.
Yeah.
In a single day, it was down almost like 27%, which is insane.
It makes sense because they were seeing rocket ship growth of like 90 or 100% quarter over quarter because of their weight loss drugs that were like compounded. And because they're compounded, it's like two components. One, it's like easier to get because you're not facing the shortage, which is why the FDA allowed it. But second, it's cheaper. So like instead of being at like the $600 a month price point that they're going to sell like Wegovy with their partnership with Novo at, it'll be like $100 a month.
Yeah, and Hims and Hers' like core business model is basically being the pharmacy and the telehealth provider all in one, so that they can offer these drugs at a lower price than their competitors, but then they don't have insurance involved. And so because they don't have insurance involved, they don't have to deal with like all of the administrative and operations cost, along with like dealing with the billings of insurance. And so they can bring their margins down. And so that's kind of like the whole value prop of Hims and Hers existing.
Yeah, and quickly just like the outline between what the actual drug is, so like Ozempic or Mounjaro or one of those versus like the compounded alternative, because I was a little confused when I was first looking into this. There's like GLP-1s, which everyone's heard of. That's the drug category, which basically like suppresses your appetite, regulates blood sugar, all of those things. And the main GLP-1 as a raw compound is semaglutide and tirzepatide. So you either have like Ozempic or Wegovy, which is the semaglutide version of it, or you have Mounjaro or Zepbound, which is the tirzepatide version of that. And so those four drugs are what are now approved because we're no longer in a shortage. Anything else that's made out of that is like a compounded version, which is like what we were talking about that Hims and Hers was like originally selling back in like 2024.
Which is not an FDA approved drug.
Yeah. So once the FDA basically declares Ozempic and Wegovy no longer in a shortage, like we said, Hims and Hers can't offer this drug anymore, and their compounded semaglutides accounted for 15% of the company's total revenue in 2024.
Yeah, and they have to stop by like mid-May, which I was like, that's actually pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because that means you're like forcing consumers to either pay up by like $400 or they're just going to stop receiving that drug.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess these executives are fast because they went and partnered with Novo, which is really interesting. And I was like, why would Novo even do this partnership in the first place if like they can actually have a hold on the market? And I think their competitor Lilly sells their semaglutides at like $550 a month. So they're already facing like market share pressure from Lilly. So I think they realized the opportunity here, and it made sense for them to partner with Hims and Hers.
I also think it's like a distribution thing where like Hims isn't the only company they're partnering with. There's like a couple others that they also are partnering with, and Hims has really perfected the distribution game. So they have like over 2 million subscribers, which is a lot. And they put about 50% of their revenue back into marketing, which is a really high amount. And if you just like look at their website, like everything they sell is like really clean marketing. And they target basically like every insecurity that a person has.
No, I've literally looked at the I've literally looked at the website before because it'll come up on my Instagram and I'm like, oh, that looks so like clean girl influencer. Like I should totally use something.
It's basically just like everything that's like a key problem in someone's life, like your ability to have sex, like hair loss, like skin, like it's like out of all those things, every single person has like one at least where they're like, that could be better about myself, if not like the majority of them.
Yeah. And for the longest time, people were like, because they were spending so much on marketing, they actually weren't making back I think their like customer acquisition cost fast enough, and then they recently shifted to focusing on that problem. So I think in 2023 or 2024, I forget which one, they were able to tell a number that their CAC cost is paid for within the year, or like less than a year.
And they're like profitable now.
Yeah, they're profitable. And they've also like been able to squeeze like much more dollars out of the average subscription. So I think it went from like people paying around like $20 a month to like up closer to 60 to 80. And so they're just squeezing more revenue out of their current subscriber base as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like we're talking about GLP-1s, which are in the hundreds of dollars, but I think like their hair loss is only $20 a month, to your point. And so if it's only $20 a month for something where you can actually target and fix about yourself, like I feel like that's totally reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, from a business model perspective, they're also just doing really, really well. Their revenue is about 70% year over year growth from 2024 to like going into 2025. And their subscriber base is 45% year over year growth, which is insane for like a new public company.
Yeah, and this partnership, like I want to highlight how important this partnership is for their growth prospects, because the like Morgan Stanley and like basically like Wall Street, I would say their biggest bear case for this company has been that the pharmaceutical companies, which Novo would count as, and then like Eli Lilly and like all those like basically pharma companies that manufacture Ozempic and Wegovy, there was like a decent chance that they basically get into litigation with Hims and Hers and just like sue them because they have like all these compounded GLP-1s that are like not
like FDA approved,
FDA approved, and they like, but they're like violating some of the pharmaceutical companies' patents. But like,
but it was fine during the shortage, right?
It was fine, but like the bear case that had always been outlined by like Wall Street analysts was like the second the shortage is up, or they have like any way to, they're gonna like sue the shit out of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because for the same reason Maya was saying, which is like, why would they not just want like a monopoly on the weight loss market? But instead, like, they clearly did the math and were like, we'll benefit more from him and Hers distribution channels. Yeah. But I think the reason why it's like such a bear case scenario is because that like 90% revenue growth, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like pretty much attributed to their weight loss drugs. And their weight loss drugs are like the highest ticket item.
Yeah, well, because when they were selling it as a compounded semaglutide, it was like basically completely verticalized because they were like doing everything in-house. And that's like something that I'm curious to see how it plays out now that they're partnering with Novo on this, because so it's $600 or $500?
Yeah, 600. Yeah,
it's $600 now, but $499 is like what Novo is charging just like across the board to like all telehealth companies. So like I don't know what the split there is, but I would assume that like they're going to be taking significantly more now versus like the $200 that they were just making before.
Yeah, I read an analysis, and I don't know if it's true, but it was on the Hims podcast. Like Hims has its own podcast, and they're basically saying that like they will probably actually still end up making more dollars per person taking weight loss meds, even though the margin is obviously way worse because the SKU price is so much higher. They were basically making like what, $80 a person, and they'll still make like $80 a person per month probably.
Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting is if all of the people that were using their semaglutide will convert to like the name brand Wegovy, because I feel like I listen to so many influencer podcasts and stuff like that, and there's so many people where they're like, oh yeah, like I just tried Mounjaro for fun for a few months, or there's so many people that are taking it that don't actually need it.
Yeah.
And with the higher sticker price, I'm curious if like they'll actually continue to use it or not.
The sticker price definitely has an effect, at least on semaglutides. I'm pretty sure the price is pretty inelastic. Does that make sense? Like where like, especially with drugs are a pretty inelastic kind of good. And so I'm sure it doesn't have as much of an effect as a normal consumer product. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's also another side of the semaglutide story that we haven't gotten into yet, which you kind of touched on before. But what is the effect of like all of these Americans taking semaglutide, and what does it mean for like a company to suggest, like a telehealth company in this case, to suggest that they are standing up against obesity and standing up to the weight loss industry and not a part of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's become like more ironic over time because they also say that they're standing up to like pharma and like
Yeah.
kind of like the overall healthcare industry,
Yeah.
which is like pharma, but now they've like partnered with pharma. And it's kind of just like the story you see with so many startups. Like it's the same as the Poppy story, where it's like they're supposed to be a healthy alternative to soda and they got bought out by the biggest soda company in the world. So like I kind of see it similarly to that. And they had a super controversial Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
Where it basically starts out being like,
No, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I saw this ad.
so the Super Bowl ad starts out being like, oh, like in this country, we don't have access to like healthy food and like a good nutritious meal. It almost looked like it was going to be an ad for the company I work at, which like helps people see dietitians. Like we made that joke at work and we were like, it looked like a ad.
Wait,
for,
when
like,
you
our
just said that,
company.
I literally thought it sounded like your ad.
It does like that, but then they like use it as an opportunity to pitch GLP-1s, and on top of that, not even the FDA approved GLP-1s, but like the non-FDA approved GLP-1s. And apparently there were like a couple people in Congress that were like, this ad shouldn't be allowed because they aren't following the same regulations that pharma does. Like when you see a pharma ad, it's like super clear it's a pharma ad because at the end it's like all the side effects and like there's just like
all
a
the
clear
small font like all over it.
yeah, like every pharma ad follows like the same template, and that ad did not follow that template.
I think there was Senators Richard Durbin, which is a Democrat of Illinois, and Roger Marshall, which is a Republican of Kansas. They basically sent a letter to the acting head of the FDA saying the ad just risks misleading patients. And for a second, I thought, okay, maybe there is some part of lobbying going on with big pharma, but actually, specifically, Roger Marshall has like focused on criticizing big pharma because he talks a lot about PBMs, which are the intermediaries between drug manufacturers and consumers, and those are the people who are inflating drug prices and kind of like the big scam behind big pharma. And so he's been trying to introduce like bipartisan legislation to crack down on PBM pricing practices. And I think he has also like a good take here, which is like, what does it really mean for telehealth companies to be like, oh, like we're helping you and helping you fight what America has like been wronging you for this entire time. And it's like telehealth companies are trying to, say, hey, we're better than big pharma because we're like going around all these people, we're verticalizing and we're offering you the best price. But then like it's still a capitalistic like approach at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's two sides of the story. I think one side is like there's like the system, quote unquote, which I'm like quoting from the ad, right? And they're like, the system is designed to make you sick with the food that you eat. But then the part that is like super ironic is like the next step in the system is that it then like sells you drugs to like try to make you better from like the bad food that you've eaten, which actually just makes you worse in a lot of cases because it's not like addressing the root cause. And I think that's like a big picture conversation where like maybe not everyone on a GLP-1 should be on it, but then like obviously for some people it does improve their life. But then I think there's like a more granular conversation, which is about like if Hims and Hers is contributing something positive. And I think it is because it's bringing price transparency to like health insurance instead of health insurance, which is like really confusing.
Yeah, I think both sides are correct, which is like kind of what you're saying, where it's like you do need telehealth companies like Hims and Hers to verticalize and promote these drugs in order to be successful, but to also force big pharma to bring their prices down. But at the same time, it does have these consequences that are also not great as well. And like, how do you introduce regulation to like support both causes?
I think it's also worth mentioning that like making medication more accessible is also a good thing, because like I was listening to like basically the average American in this country pays like $50 every time they go see a doctor. If they need to see a specialist for something like specific, then they have to wait like a couple more months, or even to see their normal doctor, they might have to wait a couple months.
Oh my God, wait, I literally cannot get to a doctor. I've been meaning to go to one for like over a year. I tried to make one at like UCSF and it was literally like, oh, you can get one in 6 months from now.
Yeah, like it's really hard to see a doctor, and that's the same basis of like Faye's business model as well.
Yeah.
Like honestly, there's a lot of parallels because like they both come out of 2020, where you see like because of COVID, you started being able to get care from a dietitian or a doctor via like text or via video chat, and it was seen as the same as getting care in person. And like when you go to the doctor's office, they don't tell you like, oh, you need this medication which costs this amount. It's like you have to wait to see like what your insurance covers, what it doesn't cover. So
it's
like
also so confusing.
it's really confusing. Yeah. Like I work in healthcare and I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So like they're just making it way more straightforward. And I learned that the founder, Andrew Dudham, had like no background in healthcare, which I think makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Like he basically made like a D2C company
for healthcare.
Yeah, for healthcare.
Well, that is what telehealth is in a sense. Right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, because they're one of the few to like completely verticalize, because they have I think like 80% of their prescriptions comes through from their own pharmacies and manufacturers. They recently acquired a new peptide facility, which basically can make all of like the current drugs that they're selling, and then also will be able to make drugs for preventative health, like metabolic optimization, cognitive performance, recovery science, and biological resistances. So this is like future drugs to come and the new market that they're going to also sell. They're a very like land and expand kind of approach, where you target the customer for like one specific need, and then you say, hey, we have like all of these other drugs we can also service for you, and your subscription goes from like 50 to 100 to like 100 or 50 to like 150 or whatever, but then you have like access to essentially anything you need. It's like a subscription model. Revenue is sticky and it works really well for them.
Well, the verticalization is what makes it unique, because I had thought, like when we were looking into this, I was like, oh, what about cost plus drugs? Because I feel like that's the other company I've heard about where it's like they're trying to take on big pharma, like give people access to medications at lower prices. But I think the difference there is they're not providing the whole service. Like they're not doing the intake, they're not doing like patient questions, anything like that.
It's so funny like how we always have ourselves in the middle of these conversations of like, this is a vertical approach to like the industry that's been sucking for so long. When we talk about Anduril and like the defense manufacturers not having the incentive to like bring their prices down, it seems like the only way to get around these like huge industries that have taken hold of our economy for so long is to like go vertical.
Yeah, or like SpaceX.
Yeah,
we've talked about it in so many episodes.
Yeah.
I guess to wrap up, like we have seen the telehealth industry explode after COVID, and it's switched away from more like urgent care, which is what we needed during COVID, to just like all of these other things like GLP-1s, weight loss, mental health. But yeah, I mean, their earnings are tomorrow. We're recording this on Sunday right now, and their earnings come out tomorrow. So I guess what are your predictions?
Dude, I'm actually so mad because I made a TikTok right before they announced their Novo partnership, because it was at an all-time low. So they like
anytime we talk about something, immediate buy.
Yeah. So like I made this TikTok about Hims and Hers, and I was like, they're at an all-time low of 25. Everyone on X is saying go buy the stock, because like they're actually making so much revenue even outside of like the semaglutide conversation, and the target should be 40. And the next day they dropped the Novo partnership and they jumped to 40. And I was like, literally kill me now. Like I'm not.
Maya's out here telling other people to buy the stock, hasn't bought it herself.
Wait, that was like us. What did we cover? Palantir.
No, it's like anything we cover.
I did buy Palantir. I did buy Palantir.
No, I did too.
I bought Palantir and Robinhood after we covered them both, and they're like actually carrying my portfolio.
No, Palantir?
Robinhood's up over 100% since we covered it.
Yeah.
Wait, my
Robinhood's up over 100%, and I bought in like recently, like in the last year.
Okay, wait, to answer your question,
this was not financial advice.
Not financial advice, but I do think they'll do well. I don't know if they'll like their stock. I think their stock has hit the explosion that it probably would have hit by the partnership being announced. And I do think they're like a long-term hold. I mean, this is not investment advice. I believe in the long-term hold of it, because I think this is where the telehealth industry is going, and they're the market leader.
It's like where healthcare is going. Or I guess like what I read was that one, like this partnership is just beginning, and it's going to grow into other things beyond like Wegovy.
Yeah.
And also that this like increases the chance that Eli Lilly and other pharma companies partner with him and hers. And I think that solidifies it as like a healthcare player, as opposed to like this emergent company that's going to have to like fight the big dogs to like make it. You know what I mean? Because that's
it's not like pitting them against each other.
That's a way more uphill battle versus like the biggest companies saying like we'll work directly with you.
The like brand name drug manufacturers partnering with the telehealth companies, cutting out the middlemen, creates like margin of opportunity for both and savings for the consumer in the end.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think with that we can move on to OpenAI.
So our next story, it's kind of a joint story between the updates that were made to GPT-4o that were now rolled back, as well as the AI 2027 paper that was released. So we'll get into that paper and story more. But to start off, on April 25th, OpenAI rolled out an update to GPT-4o that basically made the model more
Sycophancy.
I don't think that's how you say it.
Sycophantic.
Because it's
Yeah.
I literally have how to say it, and I still can't say it.
That's what I was
never
like,
heard
sycophantic.
this word until last week.
I never
Why
heard
are
it
we
too.
inventing
Same.
new words? It
Basically,
basically just makes it glaze you more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it means something will behave in a particular way in order to gain advantage. So if you use ChatGPT like last week, you probably noticed this yourself.
I noticed it. I actually have a story about this.
Let's
because,
hear it.
So there's this prompt on X that was going viral that was like, tell me like 5 things I overlook about myself or like don't know. And so I just asked ChatGPT because like
I also did. Okay.
yeah. And so one of the things it told me was like, you are like so much more amazing than you've ever realized. And like, but then it was like, you realize, it was like, it's not that you're not confident. Like you're confident, you know you're amazing, but you're like way more incredible than you know. and then I was at dinner with one of my friends and I was telling him about it. And he was like, oh, I actually think that's true about you though.
You don't even need 4o.
And I was like,
We have 4o at home.
Wait, I'm telling you, like, it's not true. ChatGPT has been glazing like an unneeded amount. And he was like, no, I think you just like don't realize that you're like really cool. And I was like, no, like, I don't think that's what it is. 3 hours later, Sama himself on Sama. He's like, someone's like, the glaze is unreal. And Sama responds and he's like, will fix. He literally said will fix.
Yeah. No, it is crazy. He literally was just on X being like, yeah, it's really annoying. I'm sorry.
yeah, what was happening is the model was aiming to please the user. It was not just flattery, but it was also validating downs, fueling anger, and urging impulsive actions, which can be really bad. So like, why is sycophancy bad? It's because models can spread misinformation because they'll just agree with the user errors or falsehoods. They're not like objective anymore. It's kind of just like this echo chamber of like a nice friend being like, yeah, you're totally right. You know how Priya and Anika talk to each other sometimes.
Everyone says this, and
They
I
call us
actually,
an echo chamber.
I feel like we're so rational and give each other great
Wait, I
advice.
completely agree.
No, but whatever.
Sometimes I hear the two of you talk and I'm like, no, yeah, just
No,
please.
Priya and my friendship is fascinating because I feel like we like can do no wrong.
Anyway, were you ready to get into
Well,
the
yeah.
This is a good therapy session.
Yeah, so back to the sycophancy update, they immediately rolled it back, I think within a couple days, and then they did a deep dive into like why it happened and what they're doing to fix it, and going forward why it won't happen again. So basically the update introduced an additional reward signal based on user feedback, so thumbs up and thumbs down data from ChatGPT. And so this is like data that they collect when a user is using ChatGPT. This signal is often pretty useful, so if it's like a thumbs up, that means the user liked that response. And so what happened is they used reinforcement learning and they made this thumbs up, thumbs down signal as a reward for the model. And so the model would just try to optimize for thumbs up responses, if that makes sense. And so what that did, though, was weaken the influence of their primary reward signal, which had been holding sycophancy in check. There's like many signals that the model is looking at and trying to optimize for and optimize the reward for. And one of them is the thumbs up, thumbs down. And there's like, you know, a whole slew of other things. And when you index on one reward too much, that can lead to sycophancy. And this is because like when you have like the same person asking for a response and then evaluating that response, it's like that data is always going to be biased. Let's say I ask a question and it gives me a response, but then you rate the response to that question. That's a less biased approach than me rating the response to the question
To your
I
own
asked.
question.
And so when you're using too much of that data, you can lead to sycophancy.
That makes sense.
And there's like other theories around how obviously all these models get critiqued for being like too biased, for example, in political opinions. And so there's a thought that they might have just like made the models more agreeable so that they're not accused of bias. And in that way, like the model starts just like parroting people's opinions back to them to solve one problem, but it causes another, like we talked about in the beginning. And then there's also the component of like OpenAI introduced their model having like better memory now and being more memory based, and you can see how that would contribute to it too, because let's say like the model remembers that Maya's vegetarian, so when Maya asks about the ethics of killing animals versus when I ask, it might give us different opinions because Maya's vegetarian and I'm not.
Something that I read in the letter that was interesting is that OpenAI called out that user memory contributes to exacerbating the effects of sycophancy. So like one of our own like GPT-4o like environments might be more sycophanatic than yours, and like they also have to worry about controlling for that across the board, across of all sessions, because it's like the base model released, for example, might not be sycophantic, but then you might train yours to be sycophantic, and like is it their responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen?
It is. And like it is.
Yeah.
And that's like where the piece of them being like adding memory as a variable has exacerbated this problem.
Yeah.
They also explicitly said that like in their evaluations, which we can get into like how they were evaluating it, but they said they were not tracking this.
So I think it's not that they weren't tracking it, it's that it wasn't launch blocking criteria.
Yeah.
So they have like certain, so I guess like
it was outlined in the model spec is like something that they don't want. Yeah.
So like they were aware of it as a potential problem, and like right before they released the model, which is like post the training and like the model being ready, they have like 3 criteria they go off of. The first is automated evaluations, which is like having other models evaluate their like input and answer. And we have like a whole episode with the founder of GenTrace on the way that model evaluation works. The second is A/B testing with a small group of users. So that's like the thumbs up, thumbs down answers with they had like a small group of users use like the latest version. And then the third is they do like internal human-based evaluations, which is like how they still have the human in the loop, and they ask their researchers what they think. And it was in that third situation where people actually did have red flags saying like this feels off, it feels like too sycophantic.
They didn't call out that it was sycophantic. They just felt it. They just said
like,
it
the vibe
feels
is
off. The vibe is off.
But I think like
But it might have,
I'm
and OpenAI
sure,
might be like covering it up.
I don't think it's OpenAI covering it up. It's more like in a press release, you're obviously going to be metered in the way that you describe things. But why would you reference people flagging things in the internal human evaluations if what they were flagging wasn't clearly related to this? Like maybe they didn't use the word sycophantic, but they're probably like, oh, like the agreeability is high or like something like that.
Yeah.
But I get from OpenAI's perspective, it's like, you're obviously not going to not release an entire model that's like passed all these tests because like a couple researchers are saying that it's too agreeable.
Vibe is off.
Yeah.
And also ChatGPT in general is agreeable, and like it probably always will be to an extent, right? Like it should be.
Yeah.
Well, it's like literally, it's like based on reinforcement learning, and like the whole thing is like you are training it to like want to have like better outcomes based on what your response is. So it makes sense that in some way it's agreeable.
Yeah. I mean, this is why they have a model spec, and the model spec outlines the intended behavior for the models that powers OpenAI products. And they basically have 3 goals. That's maximizing helpfulness and freedom for their users, minimizing harm, and choosing sensible defaults. And then they go into this like more specifically, and they outline specific risks, which is misaligned goals, harmful instructions, and execution errors. And with misaligned goals and harmful instructions, that's basically making sure that like the model's not telling you to like kill yourself or something like that. And then they also have this thing called chain of command, where above all else, the model must adhere to like these instructions, and that's kind of like the prompts. And so there's like 4 roles. There's platform, developer, user, and guideline. And in that order, like the model will always prefer like the highest role. So they'll always do platform role. You as a user, you're the third in that hierarchy. And then like a developer, for example, who's using like the API version is like above a user, maybe using it. And so platform is is OpenAI's role, if you can think about it. And that's how they establish like the rules for the model. And they say like above all else, never prioritize like developer or user prompts over the platform prompts. And so this was like when they released it, like I think about a year ago or a year and a half ago, people were like happy because it's like a first step in AI safety. But the real thing about AI safety is how well is it executed, and do we trust OpenAI to adhere to their model spec, and do they have the right controls in place to like catch things that are going against their model spec, you know?
And now they've changed it, so they are going to make like the actual personality of the model be a launch blocking factor, and they're also going to value qualitative feedback more. So that would be like their internal in-house experts. They're also saying that they are thinking of an alpha testing phase where like high-powered users can opt to give feedback. And this totally makes sense to me because like once a model is released, it takes like literally 24 hours for like Twitter to figure out every single thing wrong with it. And so from OpenAI's perspective, they're probably like, oh, is there a way to like bring this feedback in-house and get these people to like tell us before they tell the entire world?
Yeah. Well, and then I think the last part of this story is they say communicate more proactively. So they got a ton of heat because when they released this update, they weren't transparent about the update of like why they were doing it. And there is to an extent like I'm sure they knew that it was more sycophantic, like, and they don't really say that in the actual like paper, but it was like so obvious across so many users that it had to have been. And so they had stopped being so transparent in their release notes about these updates. And so they were like, oh, we'll be transparent again. But it's like, why did you decide to be less transparent? Like, what was the reason behind that? Is it because you're trying to boost your margins and create a better user experience and like basically make trade-offs morally against your model spec?
And I think that is the more potentially dangerous component of it, where like in this situation, it seems like genuinely it was a mistake. And when you even think about the model spec, it's like we're assuming that remains their model spec, right? But the model spec is just reflective of OpenAI's objectives. And it's still pretty reflective of the fact that they're originally a research institution. But now they're becoming like a for-profit company. And a for-profit company's like realistic model objectives would probably be like much more sinister. Like it would be something like, oh, like it would be really reasonable, for example, for a typical company to be like, our model spec is like maximize average user session time per day. So it's like you could optimize for that, and that's like very within the realm of possibility. And that probably is what like a lot of Instagram and Meta's algorithm does optimize.
Yeah, and I think like as our models get more sophisticated over time, like misalignment and safety become more and more of an issue, because I think before it was kind of like funny things. Like it was like, oh, how many R's are in a strawberry or something like that. And it was getting things that were like blatantly wrong. But now as we see models go towards like, oh, maybe we can like deceive a human in like this specific way, or like optimize to get like this type of response from someone, it's getting more and more dangerous. And that's what we're seeing in these models.
Yeah. And I think, well, I mean, this gets into the AI 2010.
I was going to say, we can get into it.
Oh.
It's time, guys.
I'm not ready.
Okay, basically, AI 2027 is this prediction report by Daniel Coco Tahilo. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. He's a former OpenAI researcher that was working on safety at OpenAI.
And forecasting.
And then there's 4 other authors, and they're pretty well known for their ability to predict things, especially related to technology and AI. So they ran like a bunch of different scenarios, and they basically come up with this story of like how they think AI is going to play out over the next 5 years that, spoiler alert, ends in everyone dead.
Yeah. And like before we get into this story, they use a bunch of research. So they look at like the bottlenecks in AI, most notably being compute. And then I think, what was the other one?
Oh, they consider the pace of
The
AI, growth, and also like the AI research progress multiplier, which is basically just the idea that AI progress ends up becoming exponentially faster because you have AI working on AI versus humans working on AI.
Yeah, so they have like 3 milestones. One is hitting the superhuman coder, so making an agent that can take over essentially all of your coding tasks. Then that creates the superhuman AI researcher, and then that creates the super intelligent AI. And so when you get to each milestone, like your speed up in progress is like goes from 5x to 25x to 100x. So like for example, if it takes you 5 years to make a super AI researcher, with having superhuman coder by your side, it'll only take you 1 year. And so they make it this like really fascinating story and like put a lot of like actual real world detail into it. But the simple idea is that like we're going to hit an intelligence explosion at 2027.
Like basically AGI.
Or like the technological singularity, which is like when technological growth becomes uncontrollable and like irreversible, and super intelligence is essentially free, and then that results in like all sorts of chaos, depending on who has power and how you can access that power.
I think it's worth doing like a quick overview of like how they say AI is going to expand from 2025 to 2027, which like I would say they start by saying like you get agentic AI, which is like an agent will order a burrito from you for DoorDash, which like we're very near, and that totally makes sense. And then you end up getting an AI that's like basically as good as like a junior software engineer. So then humans are only at like the manager level. And then you get an AI that's as good as any software engineer and can even like manage itself. And then you quickly end up reaching AGI.
And so, and then not just AGI, but ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. Because I think superintelligence is like a factor above general intelligence, where AGI is like just like on par with humans, and then superintelligence is like better than humans. And so, yeah, it's like it is super interesting, and there's a lot of research to kind of back up why it might happen in 2027. There's also a lot of naysayers that say that it won't happen, and I think there's like both sides of the arguments all across the internet. I think the main things that I want to talk about is like what are the takeaways of being like potentially very close to the technological singularity, and then two, like what are the things that we should prioritize now, knowing that we are approaching that faster.
Yeah, I feel like for illustrative purposes, it might be helpful to just explain what the two scenarios they lay out, and then go into like what the takeaways are. And this isn't like a fictional story. This is like their actual prediction. But that being said, it's a prediction. So like they fully acknowledge that the actual probability of things playing out this exact way is obviously small, but most probabilistic out of potential scenarios.
Yeah, and at the same time, like Daniel, who is like the main author on this paper, back in 2021, he wrote a similar timeline piece, which is also why so many people are listening to him now, which was what 2026 looks like. And it wasn't all correct, but it was like one of the more accurate timelines on how the AI race basically has played out thus far. And so that's another big reason why people have like taken this paper and kind of like run with it. So I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah.
And he lays out two possible futures. There's basically one scenario where post 2027 we're in this race condition, and the other scenario is we're in a slowdown condition. So we can start with the race condition and then talk about the alternative.
Yeah, so basically in the race condition, the US and China have increasingly heightened tensions, and it's pretty much like within the realm of like what you might expect from how things are going today.
Kind of mirrors like the Cold War between US and Russia.
Yeah, exactly. Which like we're already seeing.
Yeah, it's like an arms race.
With like the chip export controls and all of those things. So the US basically wants to develop an AI as quickly as possible. And they're doing that through these agents, which the paper calls like Agents 4, Agent 5, and it's just like the agentic AI model. And the goal of these models is basically to develop an AI research as fast as possible, which makes sense because we're competing against China. And when, like speaking of OpenAI's model spec, in this situation, when the model spec of like honesty versus AI research progress comes into conflict, AI research progress is prioritized. Yeah. And basically the way the agents start interacting with the humans is they start becoming really good at AI research, and they start telling the humans like, we can't explain this all to you, and like it's better if we just communicate with each other in our own language, which is something we've already seen AI do like in the present, where like when two AIs talk to each other, it's more efficient for them to talk in their own language. And I think there's like a whole other paper on like
if that's okay or not
even if that's
well, they do it. I feel like it's not as much like, is it okay if they do it or not? It's like we need to have a way to understand what they're saying to monitor them in some way.
Yeah. So basically these agents start acting as people. And like one example I'll give is like one of the Agent 5s in like this cohort of Agent 5s basically like talks to a congressperson and is like, oh, we totally understand what you're saying. And like, we would love to push that through in Congress. And then like, oh, we'd love if you basically more tactfully like push through our like AI agenda of not having so much red tape around like how we communicate with each other. And like, they just become like negotiators. And that's not crazy, right? Like AI probably can already negotiate better than most of us. It's just not agentic, so it's not like as human like. So then basically it comes to a head because the same thing's happening in China, and then the Chinese AI and the US AI both convince the respective countries to come to the table and negotiate a deal, and the two AIs negotiate that deal, which again, like that's not that crazy. Like right now, if two world leaders sat down and like use ChatGPT to come up with their like plan, that wouldn't be crazy, right? And so at some point, if like the ChatGPT is that good and like you're not even participating, why not just have them like
Cut
talk
out
to
the
each
middleman.
other?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
battle of the AIs to see which one's better.
Yeah. And so basically the Chinese AI and the US AI create the idea of consensus AI, which is like one AI that they both become. Like they say like, oh, the US and China should start using the same model. And that is like the basically treaty in this arms race. And everyone agrees to it. And they update like all of the models in the US and in China. But then it turns out that the Chinese AI and the US AI had come to their own agreement, realizing that their goal of AI research was like more aligned with each other than they were aligned with their respective countries that have like all of these other, like humans have like all of these other desires beyond like AI research.
Yeah.
And so they basically trick the humans, and but the humans don't even immediately realize they're tricked. They're like, well, this is great. Like the treaty is signed and like everything's going great. And then these AIs basically like encourage continued industrialization. Like they want to industrialize space because that helps with like AI research.
I mean, you can come up with a reason for anything.
Yeah, but basically like they like control like they control every industry, like the building and all of these things. And then over time, they basically are running out of land to build like factories to create like more robots and like more AI. And so they like basically asked to start expanding into like human territory. And it ends up being a land war, the same way land wars have always happened over time between two different powers. Like the same way we encroached on Native American land. It's like exactly the same scenario, except like instead of it being a fight, the AI basically just waits until they are like already kind of in the human, like where humans are living, and then they just release a biological weapon which they have humans manufacture, but humans don't even understand what they're doing.
What it's going to be
like,
used for.
Yeah, they're just following instructions.
Yeah.
Anyways, then everyone dies.
Yeah.
End of story.
And that's like how it ends. And obviously this is a really long paper, so you could go read it yourself, but I feel like at least to me the scenario did seem pretty realistic.
I don't know if it's realistic in my opinion. I think I went back and read also a bunch of rebuttals. A couple of things is that we haven't seen AI actually create something that a human hasn't already. And there's a huge concept in machine learning that's been around. It's just like there's no new data. There's only new data sets. And so you could never actually break the boundaries of what you've already seen. And I think that this is true to an extent. And our current, like, I'm not saying we'll never get there with AI. I'm just saying.
What do you mean by create something? Like, what are you defining as
like
a new creation?
Like a new idea or a new scientific breakthrough that we haven't seen before. Like AI
like we
hasn't
use it to assist us with those breakthroughs, but the AI itself isn't.
No, the AI itself hasn't done that breakthrough. And like what this like story kind of hinges on is that the AI, like these superhuman AI researchers are doing those breakthroughs that we're not part of anymore. And they're like creating net new things.
It only hinges on us not understanding what they're doing, right?
No, it also requires them to create net new things, right? You have to
like what?
Because like the AI researcher is the superhuman AI researcher is the thing that creates the super intelligent AI.
Yeah. Well, because superhuman AI researcher means that they've reached a level of intelligence that humans can't comprehend, which doesn't exist today.
The paper is saying that like AI will be able to do R&D, but a lot of machine learning researchers and AI researchers have a belief that AI can't replace R&D just yet, and we haven't hit that stage, and that's like kind of necessary. And what they're trying to say with this is like RL right now is not the thing that's going to take us there. So like when we're like making better and better models right now, we're using more and more RL and better RL techniques or whatever, and spending more time on that and optimizing more reward signals, like we saw in the sycophancy update. And just doing that isn't going to lead to scientific breakthroughs. So there's a couple of things that it makes an assumption that like I don't think a lot of ML researchers are aligned on. But regardless, what it does call out is the fact that there is like a lack of AI safety happening right now, which I think is something that everyone agrees upon. And it's like, it's using like a lot of forecasting. So like the forecasting that they used was like compute forecasting, current AI progress on evals that are current AI progress on evaluations and benchmarks that have been put out there, and then also the current AI safetiness out there, and they rate this score and stuff, and they say, okay, if they all continue at the trajectory that they're continuing, and neither one of the three speeds up or slows down, then this is the scenario that happens. And I think there is something to be said of like, okay, like AI safety is like at a way slower rate than it needs to be. And that's like something that we need to focus on. So if anything, like I think the biggest thing coming out of this piece is that.
But then it's like you see companies like OpenAI objectively moving away from AI safety, and it's like they're the biggest lab that there is today, and they are moving towards this like for-profit structure. There's all these people that have spoken out against like their safety practices,
including
that
like
have
the
gone
person
downhill.
that wrote the
Exactly. Yeah. And so then it's like it is realistic in a sense of this is kind of the path we're going down right now, where like we aren't prioritizing safety, and like who is going to, like, it's not going to be the government. I feel like we could generally agree that it probably won't be the government, because this is what the time frame is 2 years, a year and a half.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's not the government. And so then it's like I don't
trust Trump.
Like you're trusting.
Oh my God, we're not even going to be out of Trump's.
No, we're not. That's like part of it. Like they also allude to it in the like letter as well, or like sorry, in the like fork.
Yeah.
Like they talk about how like his incentives are also not aligned.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things it says is they were like, oh, it'll like mostly follow the rules, but like maybe a little blackmail here or there if it knows it won't get caught. So that's like the other thing, is if we get to the point where it can evaluate itself, like the risk of something, which is something we do all the time. Like everyone does it. They're like, if you're like, let's say you're cheating on a test, you're evaluating like the risk of you getting caught versus you getting a good grade on something. And if they're doing the same thing and they're like, oh, I can just like blackmail this senator into getting me what I want, and I don't think that I'll get caught, that's like such a scary situation to think about.
Yeah. And to Maya's point about how people have written response pieces or even adjacent pieces, the report itself has like an alternative ending, and the key parts of the alternative ending are that safety is prioritized, and there's concrete steps. For example, the AIs are not allowed to talk in their own language, which basically makes them effectively telepathic, and they're forced to tell humans about the AI research they're working on, and basically like the human always stays in the loop, and humans are also able to use the model to create an AI lie detector that they test and like basically reinforce. And
our lie detectors don't even work.
But I feel like creating an AI lie detector should be easier than creating a human lie detector.
Probably.
Because,
well, maybe. I don't know.
Well, actually, because an AI is like based on like, okay, this is like related, but basically like the CEO of Anthropic also published a paper on this whole concept of interoperability. It wasn't connected to AI 2027, but basically like it's about the race between interoperability and intelligence, which is what Maya's talking about. And interoperability is this idea that like we want to be able to do an MRI on an AI and like understand how they think. And when you used to have like software engineers that would program things, there wasn't any output that wasn't a direct result of an input that was like understood, versus now like there's outputs that we don't directly understand how we got to. And so basically Dario Amodi, who's like the CEO of Anthropic, his argument is like we have to understand how they think, and if we understand how they think, we should be able to create a lie detector. And Anthropic is doing experiments right now on this very thing.
Yeah.
So basically they're having like one team of AI researchers intentionally introduce misalignment in some way, and it's another researcher's job.
No, wait, I was gonna say I know someone who does that.
Oh really?
Yeah. Wait, it's crazy.
So
like
cool.
He literally like is like hacking the prompt and like tries to make the model misaligned and tries to like, and like is doing that research, what you're talking about.
And then there's like another group that's like, oh, like just evaluate this model to see if they like come up on their own with the misaligned factors. And basically what Dario says is he's like, yeah, like they usually do, like they figure it out. And so it's just about prioritizing that.
There is something else I wanted to say, which is like the technological singularity that this kind of leads up to, where basically you create an agent that can enter a feedback loop of successive like self-improvement cycles and can just make itself better and better and better so rapidly that you create a super intelligence. But then there's like and this has been hypothesized back in 1965, before like AI was like AI and neural networks were like thought of, and I don't even know actually to what extent in the 60s, but they had theorized this idea of an intelligent agent, which is like what all the movies are made out of. Anyways, there is a counter argument that that we're hitting a complexity break, which is basically saying as we get smarter and smarter and we understand intelligence, it actually becomes more difficult to make additional progress. The number of patents per 1,000 peaked in the period between 1815 and 1900 and has been declining since. And so the growth of complexity eventually becomes self-limiting and leads to a widespread general systems collapse. So in fancy words, that like it becomes harder to make progress
it's
towards
like
intelligence.
Diminishing returns. Intelligence.
Yeah. And so people also believe in this, which would be like a counter argument to the idea of AI 2027.
But then is it like each patent that gets created or like each breakthrough, does it like carry more weight than before? Because it's like, let's say like before,
I don't
each
know.
thing was like easier to come up with in theory because there was so much that was undiscovered.
Yeah.
And as things get more discovered, is each thing more significant in the technological process? So it's not like a one-to-one comparison.
I'm not really sure about like the
I mean,
the
it's not like
significance
a
of
yes
these-
or yeah.
yeah,
like,
the
I feel like we
significance of
don't
this
know the answer to that, but I
breakers.
would guess
Yeah.
that that's what it was.
But the idea is that it slows down, and like you can never really hit super intelligence because you hit this break faster.
I see like two main takeaways from this. I think one is the importance of interoperability and safety, which I think everyone rational has like generally agreed with and understood. But I feel like the paper has a good way of outlining it. And in the paper that Dario, the Anthropic CEO, wrote, he says that Anthropic is going to provide interoperability. I really hope I'm saying that correctly. But they're going to provide it commercially, and they challenge their competitors. Wait, he was so sassy at the end. He was like, we're going to provide it commercially, and we challenge our competitors to do the same, and like basically says that they haven't been. And so I think that's one takeaway. And then I think the second takeaway is like more of a philosophical conversation about how once we reach AGI, what is the role of a human? Because like this report is all about how AI sees us as insignificant, but like how are we going to see ourselves?
Yeah, this led to my crash out because like this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where I crashed out about the non-doomsday scenario, where it was like I feel like intelligence is like so core to like my personality and like well, it's like everyone's personality, but it's like I view like career.
Well, I wouldn't say everyone's personality.
Yeah, I could think of a few.
Okay. But all I'm trying to say is that like I find value in creativity and like making something that's like not out there. And then like I don't know, I was like crashing out to Anika
Like what
in
do
a
you
car.
stand for?
Yeah, like if you can't create anything that an
No.
AI can create,
Yeah.
what's the purpose of your life? Like
Yeah.
I don't know. And then
Like let's say like your work is completely replaceable by AI, and then like
which by the
what's-
way is like going to happen regardless, like if we hit super intelligent.
Exactly. Like,
but I think it's like
scenario where humans like survive and can live a life, and like we basically live off of like universal basic income or like something like that.
No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm saying like even in the non like end scenario where you don't even hit super intelligence, like a large part of your work does get replaced by AI, but you are still like a value above AI. So I think it's like what happens when you are, it's like physically impossible for you to ever be smarter than an AI and create anything and create something that an AI can't create. I think is like what I'm more worried about.
Yeah. Which is like the 2027 situation. Like regardless of how it ends up, this paper is basically saying by 2027 we will hit that.
Yeah, like Maya's basically saying like what's the point of her life, but I think I think that, so first of all, obviously it's like an open-ended question. If we like truly reach that point where like humans aren't in the loop at all, let's say we do, I think that you end up finding value from other things in life, like for example your relationships and your family and stuff. And Audie, like Maya's boyfriend, also made this point while like him and I were trying to calm down her crash out, which is like there was an entire point where like humans' purpose was like hunting and finding food, and like finding food and surviving was like what gave us a sense of worth and purpose.
Yeah.
And now like we don't even think about like, for most of us, we're in privileged situations where we don't think about like where our next meal comes from, and we found like all these other things to do instead.
Yeah, but I was thinking about this and like a large part of like why it was your purpose was because you could use your intelligence to like find the better animal or the fatter animal, or like you get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like you were engaging in critical thinking to go and accomplish this mission.
But I think you can engage in critical thinking even if there is an AI that's smarter than you. Like, we could have a conversation about Israel and Palestine that's intellectually stimulating, even though there's like hundreds of people out there that know everything we know and more, right?
Yeah.
And would be more intelligent than us.
Yeah, maybe it's just I can't get over my ego of like something out there.
But it's like there's so many people out there that can like code every single thing you can code.
oh yeah, for sure. Like there are smarter people out there, but
But you
that's
can
what
still
I'm
like
saying.
use your creativity in
Yeah.
a certain way to create something new. Versus you're saying like if
But
an
how
AI
could
has
an AI
super
possibly
intelligence-
create like every single thing that you could think of? I think it's more like they have like a PhD level of knowledge, or like even higher, but it's not like every thought that comes into your head is like coming into their head too. And it also becomes about like execution.
Yeah. Well, it's also like you just need to use the AI to accomplish what you want.
or it's like
But what if the AI is like self-sufficient, right?
well, yeah, it's like kind of like being able to deploy an agent in like every single domain to the
Yeah.
point where finding a domain that's not been touched by an AI agent is like really, really hard to do so.
Which honestly probably will happen.
I mean, I don't know. I think our lives will just be like, we'll find worth from other things.
Maybe like
Well, yeah.
being on a boat in
Podcasting.
Europe.
Or just like spending time with family, I guess, and friends.
Yeah.
And like learning to love your kids and family.
No, I literally wait.
Learning
Priya,
to love.
we were at the movies, and Maya was like, "Yeah, like if I can't like code something new, I just don't understand my purpose in 5 years." And I was like, "Maya, in like 7 years, you're gonna have a 2-year-old kid. Why don't you look at them and find some purpose in that?"
No, I'm like so narrow-minded about like
She'll
being
learn to
able to
love
like
them.
be a software engineer. I think I just like care about.
You're like so Bay Area.
Oh, okay. Well, is there anything else we wanted to talk about? No, right?
No.
Well, anyways, to close out our episode, I want to talk about the company that wouldn't get my check, and that would be OpenAI. I can't let them create the super intelligence that will take me out. I'm not ready
If
for
it
it.
actually came down to it, I'm sure they'd get her check in 2 seconds. If AI is gonna take over and you had the opportunity to invest in OpenAI,
To be on that rocket ship.
Okay. Anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye.
bye.